On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very exclusive treat. He's a former world champion athlete, university coach, badass martial arts instructor, and college professor, no big deal. After an intensive 20-year spiritual quest, his teachings found its way in the form as the Peaceful Warrior's Way. Way of the Peaceful Warrior has become one of the most beloved spiritual sagas of our time. His work continues to evolve over time to meet the needs of a changing world, and his story is so captivating, it vaulted from the pages to the big screen in a movie that impacted me personally a great deal. Big facts. His keynotes and workshops span the generations to influence men and women from all walks of life, and his words will penetrate your soul. What strikes me most is his profound realization. Impacting others' lives brings more fulfillment than any solitary pursuit of self-improvement. His global teachings, encouraging us to embrace our inner peaceful warrior, have inspired countless souls to pursue personal growth and enlightenment, and he embodies the very essence of his teachings, continuing to evolve, learn, and serve with unparalleled humility and grace. He's just a juggernaut in all realms of life and a remarkable father and husband. Please welcome the insightful, abundant, handsome, and resilient, the empowering Dan Millman. How you doing, Dan?
Wow, Craig, with that introduction, I feel like just saying, are there any questions?
Good. I hope I did good by you. I take great pride in those. Today's not just a normal podcast episode, if I'm being honest, and we were having a great conversation before we record. Oftentimes I get the opportunity to really connect with someone that played such a key role in my life. And I want you to know, and I want to acknowledge you, the ripple effect that that has had for what I'm doing now can't be unnoticed. And your book and your movie, The Peaceful Warrior, I found when I was a pretty dark season of life a few years back, and it was a huge inspiration to me. So for our listeners today, in case you were not familiar with Dan, my best suggestion is to do a deep dive, play catch up, check out all the unbelievable stuff he's got going on. What I think will be most valuable is we should have an awesome conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Yes.
Dan, what is your superpower?
To answer that, I have a brief story. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, was in hospice care. He was dying, and his good friend Houston Smith, who literally wrote the book titled World Religions, asked Aldous, he said, Aldous, you, as much as any Westerner, you've traveled the world. You've studied, actually practiced within every spiritual culture worldwide. Is there any way to summarize everything you've learned? And Professor Huxley said, I'm a little embarrassed to say I can probably summarize it all in about 6 words. Try to be a little kinder. And maybe I could say, if I had to present one superpower, perhaps it's kindness. Some people call it compassion if they're Buddhistically inclined. But I think that's the best I can do, because that is within our control. No matter what mood I'm in, no matter whether I'm feeling up or down, I can always do little kindnesses to people around me, in my family, grandkids, and in the world in general.
That's the most beautiful answer I've ever heard. And it's interesting because kindness is something that affects both the giver and the receiver, right? Because the person that's receiving the kindness obviously feels good, but even you feel good to do something. And I think it's very overlooked, and it is a beautiful superpower. And I know that you have that. Sometimes the simplest things to do are also the simplest not to do. And like you said, being kind is within our control.
Yeah. Because behavior is in our control. If I asked you to touch the tip of your nose, you could do it. I can do it, unless we're disabled, of course. I intend my hand to move, and it moves. In other words, the way I move my mouth, the way I speak, my bodily actions during the day, I have direct conscious control over that. It doesn't mean I can become a golf wizard or, shoot baskets like Michael Jordan or whoever, because that takes practice. But in terms of our everyday behavior, our actions, we have more control over that than we actually can will ourselves to feel something different from the way we feel in a given moment, or to have a different kind of thought arise. These thoughts happen to us. We don't just say, I think I'll think this thought next. Thoughts arise, the discursive mind, they just pop in. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. That's natural. It's in the mind's noise. But we can't control what thoughts pop into our head. We can't hold on to a thought indefinitely. So rather than focus on trying to fix my mind and think more positively, and we can get into that if you want, or have different emotional states. And there are a lot of techniques we all have learned about changing your state, doing NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or some other technique, like actors try to control their emotional tone while they're performing. But those are ways to influence emotions. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So rather than focusing on trying to fix my mind and fix my emotions, I often advise people, in the words of Shoma Morita, a Japanese psychiatrist. He said, 3 guidelines for living wisely and well are: first, accept your thoughts and feelings as natural to you in the moment. What I mean by accept is, as you would in meditation, notice they're there. Don't struggle with them, just notice and move on. The second principle is know your purpose. What is your purpose? For example, I know my purpose right now. You know your purpose right now. In the moment, excuse me. Swallowed down the wrong pipe. Okay. So know your purpose in the moment. And the third principle is do what needs to be done in line with your purpose. It's very respectful of each individual, because we can do, it's not according to Dan Millman's philosophy or a holy book or anything else. It's what is your purpose in this moment, a constructive purpose, and then do what needs to be done. So those 3 guidelines, focusing on what we do, simplifies life radically. Barbara Rasp, a writer, once said, the lesson is simple, the student is complicated. Because we tend to complicate everything in our lives. But if we just focus on what do I need to do right now, what can I do, rather than, oh, but God, I'm feeling this, and oh, I need to change my thought state, rather than just what do I need to do, that can radically simplify our life. And that's a whole teaching, a whole approach to living in our first, 15 minutes?
Yeah, not even. This is unbelievable. I encourage everybody to grab a journal. And this is probably going to be worth a re-listen, if not 10 of them. There's so many places we can take this conversation. I'm like a kid in the candy store right now. I heard you say somewhere recently, I thought it was so beautiful. I just wanted to bring it up to you. Maybe you were in a conversation interview or something. You said, sometimes we need to back up to get a running start in life. And you were referring to when someone might be going through a challenging season. How good is that reframe?
I think that's, it is a common reframe. I didn't make it up, but I picked it up somewhere myself, as we all do, picking off the cherry tree of life, the various fruit. But the idea is many of us feel like we're stagnating, we're stuck, we're going nowhere, and even slipping backwards. Like, gosh, I was better at this point in my life. So that's the reminder. We may just be backing up to get a running start. And a quick story. I was
Please.
When I turned 60, which was about 18 years ago, I decided I wanted to learn to ride a unicycle. And at that time in life, I had some lower back issues. Many people can relate to that. But nonetheless, I said, it'll be good for my core. I want to learn to ride a unicycle. It's a humbling experience. If any of your listeners or viewers have ever tried it, it's quite humbling. You get up on it and whoop, goes out from under you. So I'll keep this story short. It was quite a struggle. A friend loaned me his unicycle and told me to practice in a tennis court early in the morning. Nobody was there yet. I could get a death grip on the chain link fence as I tried to ride around, holding onto this fence all around the court. And then I would lean forward and see how far I could careen before it went out from under me. So after a week, not much progress, 6 pedals, then it went down. And the second week I could do 12 pedals. By the end of the third week, something clicked and I was doing figure eights around the tennis court and I could ride. Now I went back every day. I quit every time discouraged, and I came back the next morning. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is because I learned two valuable things that I'd forgotten from my old gymnastics days. One was that everything is difficult until it becomes easy. The second thing I learned was there were about 2 days during this 3-week period where everything fell apart. I was confused mentally, I was confused physically, I was worse than, and that's why that last topic led me to this story. I seemed like I was worse than I was 4 or 5 days before, like I'd slipped backwards. But then I noticed that the day after those so-called bad days, I made a breakthrough. I made a sudden improvement. Because what was really going on, I realized that during those so-called bad days, that's when the learning was happening. That's when it was transferring the information from my front brain to my more instinctive brain. And people might say, well, that sounds like a good theory, but what I mean is anybody who's learned to drive a gear shift car with a stick shift remembers, now some of you younger people don't even remember that, but those of us who learned to drive stick shifts, you had to think about it. Okay, you had to think, put the clutch in, step on the gas,
Yep.
let the clutch out, first shift the gear. But after a while, it's just automatic.
Second nature.
And that's what was going on in my brain. So that's why those so-called bad days are actually when the learning, the transfer is really going on. And that could happen in a relationship. We have a crisis, a bad day in a relationship. But if you stay with it and keep practicing consciously, then you can make a breakthrough to deeper levels of intimacy, for example, in any field. So don't be discouraged. Those so-called bad days are actually very good days. So that's what I learned about slipping backward and maybe getting a running start.
This is straight up unbelievable. 8-figure conversation if someone's willing to apply it. And I just want to put a caveat there. You have to have the right consciousness, right? So if you're in a tough season and like you said, like you got discouraged, but then you came back the next day and you said, all right, I might not love this in the moment, but it's part of the vision here. I'm going to stick with it. So you have to move forward with the right consciousness.
Yes. As one sage said, when running up a hill, and you can relate to this being a runner, it's okay to quit as many times as you want, as long as your feet keep moving.
That's awesome. That's so relatable. Yeah, this is so good. You said before, everything is difficult until it becomes easy.
Yep.
Right there. We could drop the mic right there. Another thing you were talking about before is purpose. And lately I've been really excited about these really big life questions and so forth. And for example, mine and your purpose right now is to just build a rapport and just have an unbelievable connection because we know that'll create the most valuable for the listeners and so forth. But if we're thinking more grander and bigger, how does one identify their purpose in life? Took me 35 years, better late than never. But I think that's a common thing that people come to me for coaching or guidance is they know that they're here for something more than they're currently settling for. How does one begin to draw upon the divine inspiration to maybe understand and identify their purpose?
Well, timing has a lot to do with purpose. I found an analogy I discovered when I lived in Marin County, California, before my wife and I moved to Brooklyn, New York. I used to drive across the Golden Gate Bridge and then up a hill through a rainbow tunnel, down up through Sausalito, and then down the hill into Mill Valley, and then up a hill, another one, and then down into Corte Madera or Larkspur Landing, and then up another hill, and so on, down into San Rafael. And I couldn't see what was on the other side of the hill until I got to the top. And I could struggle and wonder about what's over the hill, but I'm not ready yet. And we've all heard that a wonderful analogy that we're like cars driving at night. We can only see as far as our headlight beam, but we can make the whole journey that way. So people who are struggling, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? If they're in their 20s, they may not be clear on that yet. And it's a time to prepare to handle what's in front of us, to find the best paying work we can or educational opportunities, and not be so concerned with having absolute mental clarity about our purpose. However, given that said, I've written 3 books that deal specifically with life purpose. One is called Living on Purpose. That's my most reader-friendly book. It's fun, it has quotes and anecdotes and stories that make points. But I think a key book is called The 4 Purposes of Life. Now, when I was writing that book, a friend of mine looked over my shoulder and said, "Hey, Dan," he said, "I don't need to read your book." He said, "I know the purpose of life. The purpose of life is learning to love. Whatever the question, love is the answer." And I went, "Well, that sounds like a good purpose." I couldn't argue with that. And he said, "Yeah." And another friend said, "Wait a minute. No, the purpose is illumination, realization, becoming one with the universe." And I said, "Well, that's a great purpose for human beings." And then another one said, "Well, wait, that's philosophical. That's in our mind. Our purpose is reproducing and keeping the species going and get busy." So I said, "Well, that's a good purpose too." But here's the thing. Just as we divide the days of the year into 4 seasons, and just as we can divide points on a compass into 4 primary directions to get a reference, by looking at our lives through the filter of 4 purposes, it brings a real sense of clarity and patience and wisdom and perspective, which is the better part of wisdom. So in this book, just very, very briefly, I talk about 4 purposes, which are learning life's lessons. We're here to learn. Life is a divine school. Daily life is our classroom. And it turns out there are 12 courses we need to learn to graduate. But that's for a whole seminar. That's not for a quick list. I'd have people overwhelmed with all this stuff. The second purpose is finding our career and calling. And that's what many people think of as my purpose. What am I here to do in terms of professionally? What area? And of course, self-knowledge is key in this area because see, if we don't know ourselves, and it takes time, literally most college graduates takes 10 years into the throes of daily life before we have a clue of what are my talents, what are my, what am I good at and what am I not good at? Where do I want to put my attention and energy? The second thing is, what are my interests? And many of us confuse our interests with what we think we should do or someone else thinks we should do. And the third area is, what are my values? And that takes the longest, weighing ourselves against the world. What's more important to me? What are my values? If we don't know those things, then we end up making the right choice for the wrong person, the one we thought we were. So once we have a clearer sense, then we can make wiser decisions in terms of relationships, in terms of career. So self-knowledge is key in that arena. And by the way, why do I say finding our career and calling? Because many of us don't differentiate the two. We get confused. Well, what's the difference of a career and calling? It's easy. A career is how we make an income, how we produce, make a living, to be independent and move out of our parents' basement, for example. Well, there's nothing wrong. Today, many young people are moving back to their parents because, it was traditional for families to live together. So there's nothing shameful about that. It's not a failure. Many people choose to do that to save money and to be around other people and have a sense of community and so on. But the point is, there are people, young artists. I can't sell out. I have to practice my guitar all day, or playing video games so I can one day be a video consultant. Whatever it is, they might do well to get a day job, make a little income, get some independence, and to appreciate the difference of a calling, which may not make any money at all. But it's something we love doing in our discretionary time. Call it a hobby, call it a mission, whatever that may be, volunteering and so on. But the career is making an income. Now, some people say, "Oh no, my career is so much more than income, Dan. I mean, I love the people I work with and it's meaningful to me and I think I'm making a difference." That's all great. But if you weren't making any money doing it, you'd probably have to find something else. So there's this making an income, which is a basic fundamental human ability, and That takes time to find the right livelihood and so on. And then there is a calling, a mission where that brings us joy, that touches our soul. Some people's career and calling are the same thing, like mine, like yours. Yeah. And how do we know? Because if we won the lottery, we'd probably continue doing a lot of the same things we're doing.
100%.
But if we'd say, no, I'd quit immediately, then it's just a job.
That's a great.
So,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be the same thing. And the third purpose in life I define, and this is really about self-knowledge, and it's my best-selling book, along with Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's called The Life You Were Born to Live. And there's also, anybody can look up lifepurposeapp.com. It's web-based. Used to be an app for your phone, but now it's web-based. Lifepurposeapp.com accesses all the information in that book in a really organized way, beautifully designed. So the life you were born to live describes the life purpose system, which I learned from a rather unusual mentor many years ago. And it's a system that has uncanny accuracy in terms of clarifying the core issues of our lives. So it's a quantum leap in self-knowledge people can get in literally in an afternoon, reading through their life path. So that is the third purpose. And the fourth purpose. See, are you sorry now you asked about purpose?
Absolutely not. I couldn't love this anymore, if I'm being honest.
Well, good. It brings a flood of information. But let me just say the last purpose may be the most important one of all. Because after figuring out 12 courses of life and learning life's lessons, and then career and calling, and then the mysterious and accurate material in The Life You Were Born to Live, to bring us back down to earth, back to this moment. The fourth purpose of life is our purpose in this moment. And as I said before, a few minutes ago, I may not know my cosmic ultimate purpose, but I can always know my purpose moment to moment. Whatever I do, there's probably a reason I'm doing it. Well, people call it the why, right? The why. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? I know my purpose right now, and I do it the best I can. And I know yours too. So those are the four purposes of life. There are others people can come up with, but these are key, like the four directions, to give us some guidance on the big picture and the moment-to-moment living.
First of all, thank you for your beautiful, just vulnerability and the way you share. So gifted, and this was awesome. And specifically, you said something that I thought was so cool there. You know, a lot of people aren't sure if what. First of all, I'll be honest, it's really great when you're able to turn your career into your purpose, or maybe they're one and the same. But I understand not everyone has been able to find that. But you said something that I thought was so profound. And how do you know if your career is also your calling? If you won the lottery, would you still do the work? And
Right.
me and you would 100% do it. I would
Yeah.
start. I would continue on Monday. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't skip a beat. And I think that's such a good indication of if you're in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, and hopefully, you know, you could figure out how to monetize that and turn it into a career. I believe you can.
Yes. Well, I used to tell my daughters, it's idealistic advice, but it's good advice. Do what you love and find someone to pay you for it.
100%.
Not all of us can necessarily do that all the time. We may not love our work. You know, people ask me, oh, don't you love traveling the world and giving seminars? And I go, well, I love giving seminars, but the travel part, what is it? What part of that? You mean putting the baggage in the overhead compartment on the plane, the crowded airports? Maybe not as much that aspect of it. But so there are things about our work that may not feel ideal, but that's true for anybody. But if fundamentally it aligns with our talents, interests, and values, well, then we've really got something.
You nailed it. I love that. I love how you always put a perspective. Like I don't love every part of it, but for the most part. Um, I wanted to share with you something special. You know, it's not every day that one of the podcasts is someone whose story I really gravitated towards. I wanted to share with you some notes that I took during a dark season when I really gravitated towards your work. But first, I wanted to ask you, how accurate was the film to the original source material?
All right, I'll answer that briefly. Books are generally better than movies, with few exceptions. because
Definitely.
books can explore the inner character and go into more detail. The book was about a quest for enlightenment. It had to do with my a real life shattering of my right thigh bone in a motorcycle crash and a recovery from that, and our team going on to win our first NCAA championship in gymnastics. The film made it about the Olympics. There were many changes. A film is a meal for consciousness in a couple of hours. So they have to make changes, simplify things, combine characters, create drama where there really wasn't as much, because conflict makes drama. So there's an artificiality about film, and people should look to the source material for accuracy. However, the film does capture some of the, as you noticed, some of the content and spirit of the book.
Yeah. Well said. Were you a part of the process when they were making the movie?
Not really. Writers generally just sell the movie rights, um, the right to adapt the book into a film, and don't have a lot else to do with it. I did make some suggestions a couple of weeks before shooting when I read the final script, and the director, to his credit, incorporated some of the suggestions I made into the final film. Um, Thereby, in my view, improving it. When Joy and I first saw a screening of the film, uh, it's funny, they hadn't even erased the wires that were holding Scott up, who was playing my role in the movie.
Mm.
He was on wires doing these various gymnastics moves, being supported, and they hadn't even erased those yet in the version we saw, and they warned us about that. They said, these will be gone, in the final film. Anyway, when we saw the film, we turned to each other at the very end and said, could have been better, but it could have been a lot worse too. So that was our view. I think it's a film, it's become a cult favorite around the world, uh,
100%.
pirated everywhere,
Yeah.
in many countries. So it's kind of a cult film at this point in time. It came out in 2006. Nick Nolte plays the old service station
Yeah.
attendant I called Socrates.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, the film, I'm positive about it, and uh, but there are, even the book contained fictional elements as well as autobiographical fact. I blended the two, and that was in service of teaching. Picasso, the artist, said, art is a lie that helps us to see the truth.
Yeah. First of all, I agree with everything, and everyone should always check out the source material. It's always better. There's more to, you can dive deeper. But the good thing about a movie is sometimes it brings awareness to the source material that someone might not have realized. Uh,
True.
yeah, and I know a lot of our audience so forth is definitely a fan of the book and so forth. And Socrates, there's a lot of questions behind that and so forth, and just so cool. And I love how you blend obviously the true story, the memoir stuff, but also a little bit of fictional stuff. What was the message, or what is the lesson that Socrates is there to really help you with? Kind of a loaded question.
It's loaded, but not. It's a fair question. Obviously, I can't give just one point, but in the movie, they made an emphasis on living in the present moment. That was one of the core teachings. And that this idea, who out there hasn't heard it's good to focus on the present moment? We all know that. There's Ram Dass's classic, Be Here Now. There's Tolle's book, Power of Now. And I certainly write about that in Way of the Peaceful Warrior. We all have different ways, different fingers pointing at the moon, as Bruce Lee might say. So many people don't really understand that there's actually no such thing as the present moment. Any physicist will tell you, how do you grab hold of a nanosecond, a millionth of a second? Which of those nanoseconds is the present? What teachers like myself are saying when we recommend focusing on what's happening right now is we're saying handle what's in front of you, because we tend to get lost in what we call the past and future, which don't actually exist. Now, that's a radical statement. Many people say, what do you mean it doesn't exist, Dan? I mean, you started this interview a few minutes ago. What do you mean there's no past? But the only reality we have is this moment. What we call the past is set of neural impulses in our brain we call memories. And memories may or may not accurately capture what really happened. Just as different witnesses in a traffic accident will give different reports of what they saw. So our memories are usually not crystal clear, even though they feel like it. So memory is one thing, and there's nothing wrong with memory. It's a great human attribute to be able to remember and learn from the past, what we call the past. And the imagination is the future. We can imagine 5 minutes from now, a year from now. We get up in the morning and imagine our day and the different errands we have to run and plan our day. But the day usually turns out a bit different from the way we planned it. There's a traffic accident, we have to go around and do a different thing. So neither memory or imagination are infallible, though again, they're great human gifts. The problem is most people spend their time lost in memory and imagination. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I wish I had done it differently. And what's going to happen in that meeting coming up today? Oh, there's a toxic personality there. And we're lost in these things that have no objective reality. Our moment of power is right now, what's in front of us. And in fact, many of us say, I wish I could quiet my mind. I've got such a busy mind. Well, the fact is, in this present moment, see, whenever we think about anything, we're thinking about something from memory or imagination, from our past or our future. In the present moment, there is no thinking about, there is only pure awareness. If I were to throw a set of keys to you and said, catch, Greg, and you reached out to catch those keys, or a frisbee, or whatever, you wouldn't be thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow. You'd be just like a cat, like awareness, reaching to grab that. So that's why people like playing frisbee, or playing catch, or performing with a musical instrument, or acting, or doing anything that draws them back into that, Chickman Sai called it flow, that flow state, in the zone. So it's pleasurable, innately pleasurable, to let go of all that stuff, the noise, and focus on what's happening now. So that's our moment of power, our moment of sanity. That's how I would describe, in a brief, a few brief comments, that important aspect of living in the present.
Beautifully said. If I ever find myself in a rut, which happens sometimes because I'm still having a human experience, oftentimes I'll just remind myself, let's just make every single thing that we do today magical by being just present in that particular activity or moment. In other words, not worrying about my meeting 2 hours from now or later, whatever the case may be. Just do the best that I can with this specific interaction, and then keep doing that throughout the day. And all of a sudden, after one day, you have so much momentum. You look back, whoa, what a great day. A lot of magic will happen from that. And it sounds so simple, but like I said earlier, sometimes the simplest things are simple not to do. And there's magic in just being so present and in the moment. And I notice when it comes to building rapport or connection with people, that's the best way, is to really just be so connected in that very moment.
Yes, I would agree with that, totally. And again, you had the experience when you were in the corporate world and the stock exchange, preparing for meetings, planning for meetings, what you were going to say. But often the meetings they go in a different direction. So that's why a friend of mine who teaches improvisational acting says, don't prepare, just show up. Now, she wasn't really saying never prepare for anything. Actors have to prepare, rehearse, and so on. But rather than focusing on what you're going to do or going to say, just be kind of open to what happens in the moment and respond to that. That's true for any athlete. That's true for people in meetings. And what we bring to the moment is fresh and spontaneous rather than pre-planned.
You know what? I think that's really beautiful. And one thing that I've really tripled down on the last couple of years is my spirituality. And what I've noticed, I used to be very big into preparation. Preparation breeds confidence, and I still prepare a great deal. Like, for example, a lot of things that I wanted to speak about today with you. But what I notice is that when you're really connected in the moment, you're a channel. And sometimes the divine thing will come through you on what to say and when to say it, sometimes 2 seconds before you need to say it.
Exactly.
Imagine as a global, phenomenal speaker like yourself, you probably experience that all the time.
Well, it's true. You know, it's never worked for me to use notes. I just, for 40 years, 45 years now, I just show up with a cosmic duh. I don't know what I'm going to say. I might have some vague ideas if I'm teaching a seminar, things I want to share, but then I just say, hi, I'm here, and now let's get into it. And that's worked well for me. Some people don't trust that. Now, maybe the better saying is prepare and just show up
Yes.
rather than not prepare at all. But then you prepare, then let it go. You know, then you've got the material, because for when you're doing an interview, I know when a host is prepared. If they've read some of my work, if they've made some notes, they ask good questions. And so obviously you have prepared, but you're also in the moment.
Yeah, beautifully said. I like that. Prepare and then let go. Um, I want to ask you two more fun questions, and then I want to dive into all the exciting stuff that you have going on now. The peaceful warrior, just that phrase alone. I imagine there's some people listening right now like, what peaceful warrior? What does it even mean?
Right. Good question. Often I begin with that in talks because people ask, how can you be peaceful and a warrior? That it seems like an oxymoron. It makes no sense. Well, actually, where this term came from, I remember distinctly. I was, again, an assistant professor of physical education at Oberlin College in Ohio. And I decided to share some of my experience in the martial arts. So I was teaching a course combining, well, part of the course was Aikido, the Japanese martial art, emphasizing blending and flowing with others' energy and an approach to life, a non-combative approach. And the second was Tai Chi. And many people are familiar with the slow motion movements of the Chinese martial art, Tai Chi. So I was going to call it in the catalog. I had to write up for the catalog, The Way of the Warrior. And that made sense, of course, but yet it didn't quite fit because these were internal arts. They were not aggressive arts, they were more receptive arts. So I said, hey, why don't I call it The Way of the Peaceful Warrior? And that's when the term first came up for me. And when I decided to write this book sometime later, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to call this. It's about so many things I learned in life. Oh, why not Way of the Peaceful Warrior? So that's where the term came from. What it really refers to is all of us. Every single one of us is striving to live with a peaceful heart. But there are times we need to acknowledge we need a warrior spirit. And it's not about fighting necessarily, except maybe with those inner demons of insecurity, self-doubt, and so on. It's more about rolling up our sleeves and marching courageously into life. Whether we feel courageous or not, marching with confidence and courage, because again, controlling our behavior. So that's where the term came from. We're all peaceful warriors in training in the school of everyday life, living with a peaceful heart and acknowledging the need at times for a warrior's spirit.
So beautiful, and I couldn't agree more. And it almost reminds me of that expression, like I'd rather have, say, a sword and not need it than need a sword and not have it. And there's something to be said about being tranquil and being so present and connected, but also being able to, kick some butt if you need to as well.
Yeah, you know, a pacifist, it's an elegant philosophy, but a pacifist is someone who is capable of defending themselves or loved ones. Though one never knows in any given situation what the outcome is going to be, but they're capable of it, but they choose to inflict no or minimum harm to the assailant. That is a true pacifist. Someone who is incapable of defending themselves and says, I'm a pacifist, no, they're a victim. So I think some training in self-defense is wise for anyone, because each of us deserves to live in safety and a sense of confidence and empowerment like that. But that's a whole other topic. I'll be doing in a few weeks a podcast that's focusing on martial arts. We'll get into some of that.
Love it.
But nonetheless, Yes, it's better to have a sword and not need it. And I hope I'll never need to use my self-defense skills. I'd much rather avoid a situation. The best way to vanquish an enemy is to make them your friend. That sounds idealistic, but by showing people respect, it can be very helpful and courtesy. Not always easy on the streets of Brooklyn.
Or New York City.
No.
We got to get together at some point for this. One thing that you mentioned there is something that nobody can avoid is the demon or the inner critic or the ego, or we like to call them the opponent. And you mentioned insecurities and self-doubt. That is something that plagues a lot of people. I imagine because you're having a human experience as well. Not only have you dealt with it, but you probably have systems in place. What tools do you use to overcome the inevitable self-doubt and insecurities?
Right. Well, that comes back to that advice about accepting our thoughts and feelings as natural to us in the moment. Sometimes self-doubt arises in certain situations. Some people feel self-doubt or insecurity on the sports field, playing a game, a competitive game where they feel very comfortable at a party. And for other people, or a social gathering, for other people, it's just the opposite. At a social gathering, they don't know what to do, but on the sports field, they're fine. So we feel those things, they come up in different situations. But here's the key. I don't ask people to feel confident or courageous or loving or kind or happy. I ask people to bring the discipline to life where we can behave with kindness, behave as a happy person, to behave with courage, to behave with kindness and everything else, because that is in our control, no matter what we happen to be feeling. Now, that sounds radically odd to many people. They go, isn't that just pretense? And I say, well, wait a minute. What if you were feeling terrified, afraid, but there was a toddler in the middle of the street, and while you were terrified, you ran out, grabbed that kid, and pulled them off the street so they wouldn't save their life? Would that be pretense? Or would it be while you're feeling terrified, you behave with courage? In fact, we can't behave with courage unless we're feeling afraid. So that's what I mean by behaving with kindness, even if we're feeling irritable, behaving with confidence, even if we're feeling shy. That's a form of liberation. It frees us from the complications of subjectivity. Of, yeah, but I have to generate the feelings first. I have to have the positive thoughts first. No, not necessarily. So this is what makes what I teach, my approach, this peaceful warrior's approach to life, different from many other teachings.
I agree 100%. And the audience knows how particular I am with who we align ourselves with. I cannot stress enough for everybody to check out everything Dan has going on. The books, all the shows, obviously the movie's cool too. Um, this is so good. There's so many places we can take it. I just wanted to ask you this on a personal level because I'm on a really interesting spiritual journey myself right now. And I think this is really the good stuff. I think strategies and tactics are important, but the stuff that really moves the needle is connecting and the spirituality. It's clear that you have some sort of position on it with the way of your approach and so forth. Where are you at with your spirituality, or what is something that you're really into?
Yeah, I haven't really sounded very metaphysical or asked people to believe this or believe that. I try to bring practical spirituality, keep it grounded. That's why I recommend living with our head in the clouds, but our feet on the ground. And in one of my books, one of my novels, I go into how we can use paradox to really reconcile some very different truths in our lives. That sounds abstract, but about, does free will exist or not? Does time exist or not? Is death real? Are we one or are we separate individuals? These kinds of questions, it turns out they're all true. Everything, both, yes. But we need to understand paradox and the different dimensions in which we live to understand how free will can be both false and real, how death can be real and an illusion, and so on. But that's a whole other teaching for another time.
Paradox, humor, and change.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. With all the really cool stuff that you have going on, and some part of me feels like you're just getting warmed up. What are you most excited about right now?
Well, excitement comes and goes. Somebody once came up to me after a seminar and said, Dan, I feel really inspired. I said, don't worry, it'll pass. Because excitement and motivation and inspiration, they come and go. What we can count on is how we behave in the moment, and that takes practice. So I will just say this: if anyone is curious about my work, they can always visit peacefulwarrior.com, and that has all my books, audio programs, a couple of online courses, a Peaceful Warrior workout that I've done for 45 years every morning as part of my routine. Um, a meditation, a very deep meditation that takes 4 minutes. So all those things are at the website, including a life purpose calculator where people can get a taste of that material in the life you were born to live. So that's all at peacefulwarrior.com, and that's a way to stay in touch. Get on my email list. I send out a newsletter once a month. So that's really what I'm involved in right now.
Love it. And how many books have you written?
18.
18.
And I've never written a book just to write another book. They all had to justify themselves. And they're all different.
Are you working on anything new now?
Well, my latest book is called Peaceful Heart Warrior Spirit. And it's a true story of my spiritual quest that reveals the story behind the story. And it talks about that 20-year spiritual quest and the 4 mentors who represent different approaches to spiritual practice.
That one has me written all over it. I can't wait to read that. This was unbelievable. Before we wrap up, I want to have just a little fun and maybe just do a little rapid fire, maybe 1 or 2 word answers, and we'll have some fun. Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Okay. Your favorite movie?
Oh, my favorite movie?
Yeah.
Well, what comes up for me is Groundhog Day because it's all about service.
Sure. I love that. Dan, your last meal on earth would be?
With my wife, hopefully.
Beautiful said. By the way, I wanted to ask you about that real quick. You guys have an unbelievable relationship. You've been together 40-something years, correct?
48 years we've been married, yes, and together probably over 50, but 48 years.
So this is just selfishly off the cuff. I'm getting married in September.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. You're doing something really right. What's your secret?
Well, let me just put it this way. Socrates, not my Socrates, but the ancient Greek, actually said, by all means, marry. He said, if you choose well, you'll be happy. And if you don't choose well, you'll become a philosopher.
That's awesome. I also heard you say somewhere that I thought it was really awesome, really helpful, is that the way you used to respond to her years ago has changed in regards, like if there's an argument or something, you have a different conscience now, and it's really helped the relationship even go deeper and strengthen.
Right. It took me 20 years to realize Joy wasn't criticizing me. She was improving me.
Yeah. But that right there is a nugget. And also I heard somewhere that, when it comes to soulmates and stuff like that, the perfect relationship is not someone that never argues. That's more of a body mate. A soulmate will press your buttons and will bring out the best of you. Sometimes there's a little bit of friction, but with no friction, there could be no light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right,
I couldn't have said it better. Yes.
Back to the rest of the trivia. Your favorite guilty pleasure?
Probably chocolate-coated graham crackers.
Sounds delicious. Your favorite workout?
Jack LaLanne, I once worked out with a fellow named Jack LaLanne. He was a fitness guru way back in Santa Monica Beach. We were doing handstand push-ups on the parallel bars. And Jack used to say, I really don't like to exercise, but I love the results. So I would say that my favorite exercise is when I go to the Y, I do some weights, and then I go for a swim. Finish up with a lap underwater, and I'm done. And then walking home, it feels really good to have done it. So older people need more exercise than younger people, just a different kind of exercise, appropriate to their age, whatever their goals are for that exercise. So I don't know that I have a favorite exercise. I do a variety. I bike around the park, I walk around the park, I walk to the Y, do my weights, do morning calisthenics. I even do some gentle exercises before I get out of bed in the morning. So it is an important part of my life.
Yeah. Well, you got to take care of the vessel. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Because spiritual life begins on the ground, not up in the air.
Love it. All right. Two more. Your favorite book, not including one of yours.
Yeah. Well, I gravitate toward, I mean, there's so many good books, so many good movies, but Lord of the Rings trilogy, it has to be one of my, I used to read it every springtime, the trilogy, because it's an epic adventure about the human spirit, or at least the Hobbit spirit.
Okay. Were you also a Game of Thrones fan?
I did. I enjoyed the series. Yeah, I think it was, again, an epic adventure.
Yeah.
With all the human gauntlet of emotions
Right.
and courage and striving, and the dark side as well as the light side of humanity.
Yep. Love it. And the last one, very deep. Your favorite musician?
Oh, that is a tough one. You know, I'd have to say a genre that, even though pop moves me, classical really resonates the heart chakra. So I'd say somebody like Beethoven. But right now, my favorite musician is my son-in-law, who's a master cellist. He plays in this area, in New York City area. And he was first chair at Juilliard for 2 years, from St. Petersburg, Russia. He's an American citizen now. So my son-in-law, Seraphim, is maybe right now my favorite musician.
Fair enough. Very cool. This was really special. Unbelievable. So many nuggets and so forth. We're going to put all this stuff in the show notes, so you're working on a bunch of your books, the website, all of that. Dan, hang up for 1 sec. I want to connect with you after. I
Sure.
want you to know the definition of wisdom, kindness, and humility. I could personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
Thank you, Craig.
That was awesome. I could talk to you all day. Love your work, Dan. And it's even cool again to spend some time with you. Thank you for awesome energy and resonance and just the wisdom today.
Well, thank you. You brought out the best in me. By the way, you see these 2 books down here on the screen. One is Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit.
Yeah.
Right here, and the other is that this a really good Time magazine special edition, The Science of Exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Quite motivating.